black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
And then you have, so my point there is, even if you talk about an Arab incursion into Spain and Portugal, you're still talking about black people as a part of that movement. Now finally, the Moors themselves. The word Moor is derived from the word Mari or Mars. This is a Greek word, Greek and Latin, M-A-U-R-I. And the other variation is Mars, almost like Maurice, M-A-U-R-U-S. It means scorched. And this was the term, sisters and brothers, that was applied to the people of Northwest Africa on the other side of Egypt. And then the Arabs began to move. Now, the first time we hear about the Moors, they're fighting with the Carthaginians, they're fighting in Hannibal's army. And then when the Carthaginians are finally defeated, they fight alongside the Romans. We have evidence we show in this book, for example, and you should try to get this book. It has Wayne Chandler's work in there. It's a lot of African, it's an anthology, it has a lot of good stuff. We reproduce in here a Roman military diploma. Apparently, at a certain point, if you fought in the Roman army and you survived and you fought in the army for 25 years, you were a veteran, you could retire with honor in many parts of the Roman Empire. And it says that some of these Moors they weren't sent back to where they came from because they were well trained. The Romans did not want to see an insurrection. So they would be sent to other parts of the Roman Empire. Some of these Africans were sent to places like Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Romania. And apparently some of their descendants still live in these places 1,500 years later. It's quite a remarkable story. We are a remarkable people. And we have the greatest story that's barely been told. And we're trying to tell that story. And then you have Moors who fight, who are identified as Berbers, and who fight the Arabs when they invade Africa at the end of the 7th century. And the greatest leader is a woman named Al-Kahina, who is called a princess or prophetess, and she's a black woman who leads the Moorish or Berber defense against Arabs in North Africa. She's eventually defeated. She tells her sons to go over to the Arab side because it's obvious they are going to win. And these people become a part of the movement that goes from North Africa into Spain.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and I'd like to welcome you to another topic I think you will find very interesting when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. And for those of you who are new to the show, the purpose of the Umoja Circle is to correct errors where errors are found, and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to the history of people of African descent, who we are, even amongst our own selves. A lot of the stuff and discussions that I hear about our history on the internet and some of the people who claim to do research, it saddens me when I hear some of the stuff they're saying, even though they might be on the right track or have the best intent, or even found pieces of the truth. But what they're doing, they're finding a piece. And I've been taught by many different scholars, including the person that you might have seen before I came on in that video clip. His name was Dr. Renoko Rashidi, the late, great anthropologist, who I had the pleasure of calling friend for a little while when he lived here, actually here in San Antonio. And actually, I have interviewed him in the past. And him and his mentor, he had two great mentors. One was Dr. Ivan Van Sertimer, and the other one was the great, also, Dr. Henry Clark. And this brother here, he helped he was the next generation of great scholar, but sadly, he died a couple of years ago, I think in 2021 or 2022, doing what he loved to do, and that's research history. As you can hear from what he was talking about, and that's going to be the topic I'm going to continue and try to do on this show, is talk about some of the problems that we have and the information that we have access to. and there's an issue about it. A lot of people don't read books. As you can see, I have a bunch of books in front of me. This is how I do my research. Yes, I use Google sometimes, and I use the internet sometimes, but this is the source of my knowledge. And a lot of folks don't do this. And the information that many people are squabbling about, just going around in circles, barking at each other, but the concept of who the Moors were has already been answered. But guess what? They're not always found on the internet. Only thing sometimes that you find, based on some of the algorithms, is that it is make things more unclear and muddy. Okay, but again, there are certain books that we have to know, and I'm gonna introduce you to some and talk about it best way I can in two half-hour shows. It's gonna be a part one and a part two. In part one, I'm gonna try to focus more on the history of the peopling of North Africa. Yes, Africa originally, based on books like this one over here in the middle, it says when we ruled the world, it means that there were black folks were in charge of this planet long before there was a Europe, long before there was even China, long before there were Greeks. We are an ancient people, and the peopling of the Homo sapiens sapiens, the people that look like me, and no matter what your ethnicity look like you, started in Africa, and all the concepts that are misplaced, say, into Western culture that we're constantly being bombarded with is wrong. And even who the Moors were and why and who they were African people. They might have been during a particular time in world history part of Islam, which is a religion, but the people themselves and the people who saw them defined them as black. Okay, and there's certain sources I first want to introduce you to, certain books, and I got a few of them here. Let's go to some of the images of the books. I have some images, and this is the question I want to deal with. Who were the Moors? Were they Arabs or Africans? When you look at any kind of documentary today in 2024 or the last couple of decades, they always do not look like that brother there. Okay, they look like the Arabs that you see today in Egypt and Algeria, Morocco, all along the northwestern Sahara Desert. Okay, there were those Arabs who were there, but they were not the original people of that land. That's the thing that you got to understand. Okay, they didn't talk to the Romans. They didn't talk to the Greeks, those who were with Alexander. They didn't talk to the Persians. They didn't talk to none of those things, but people that looked like him. But why do we not see him or his image or people that look like him in any of these documentaries when it talked about North Africa? I'm not saying today, yes, it's a complex mix of different people, okay? But these people came in during the AD time, 10 AD or 300 AD and 600 AD and those type of times. But when you talk about Africa, where humankind going back 200,000 years came into being and great civilizations, they looked like him or some variation of people. They were black people all over, okay? And they're in books. So let's go on to another book that I think you might find interesting. Now, if you want to narrow it down to the Moors in Spain, this is a great book right here. And actually, a lot of folks tend to think that people who are like me, who are African-centered and study great black scholars, that's all we look at is black scholars. I learned from Dr. Clark that you got to look at the European books. And this is my copy of that same book, The Moors in Spain. I didn't Google this. I read this book. So some of the information I'm not an expert, okay? I didn't learn this in school. I had to be autodidactic, and a lot of the information is hidden in these books, and you're not going to get it. I don't care if you got a college degree or some people who have doctorate degree. There's going to be issues in how you're going to deal with it. So let's go to another book that I want to introduce you. Oh, well, let's go. This gentleman, this fine gentleman here, is the person who wrote that book, the Moors in Spain. Okay, his name is Stanley Lane Poole. Okay, Stanley Lane Poole. Okay, a Englishman. He was not African-centered. He didn't care about about black people. He was a loyal British citizen. You know, he wasn't about black rights, but he was just about research, and he did an excellent job. And I got to give him credit. Okay, and that's the one who wrote that book. And this was written in the 1880s. Okay, I think 1886 or 1883, somewhere along that. There are some scholars who just try to speak the truth. And those are the books that you also should be reading. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Another excellent book is another book that of another great scholar, another polymath, just like Dr. Clark, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. Even Dr. Runoko Rashidi helped write that book. Okay, I think Dr. Rashidi wrote the first chapter, but this is one of the most excellent books, and it's titled The Golden Age of the Moor. You see, the information is out there, and these books are documented. Okay, contemporary writers they quote. They talk about the geography, the geopolitical things going on there. Who are the people? How did people could look at these individuals that they call Moor? Did they look at them as Arabs, or did they look at them as black Africans who just converted to Islam and were true believers in Islam, but they were black people? Let's go on to the next slide. Here we go. Where do you always hear people today, or the last 100 years or 300 years, start when it comes to people that look like me? Okay? And who in schools we start when it comes to black history, where? Enslavement, right? Where do people like to begin African history? Enslavement. And there is a reason why that they're doing that, because there's a narrative, okay? You see, history is what keeps a people oriented psychologically and on track about who they are and what they contribute to a society. So the psychology of a people is drawn from their unique history. And we transmit that psychology culturally the way we transmit our DNA biologically. So we pass it down but if the information is skewed, like it has been in our education as black people of who we are not, we did have this part of our history, but it's recent history, and it just was an interruption of more ancient history. That heraldry picture on the side is something I just want you to look at. This image on the right of the screen, there's a bigger picture of it. It shows two black men holding up some signs. And this is the heraldry of a import-export business, okay? And you see the elephant and everything to do with Africans, but these are representation of what was going on. This company was formed in like 1600s, all right? But guess what was going on in the 1600s? The transatlantic slave. And those people who are writing the information, they always want you to think that we came into existence and Western culture always dominated us in some way, okay? So they even had the audacity to put a heraldry in with two, and guess what? They're wearing grass skirts. You know, I mean, I'm surprised they didn't put bones in their nose. Let's go on to the next one. And I'll get back to that picture in a sense. And this is the company that heraldry represented. The Royal African Company was an English trading company, okay, established in 1660. Primary focus on trading along the West African coast, Gold Coast, Ivory Coast, with a monopoly on English trade in that region, and most notably involved in the slave trade. transported large numbers of our ancestors, Africans, to the English colonies and brutalized them. It was chartered by King Charles II and primarily traded in gold, ivory, and slaves. Its headquarters was based in Cape Coast Castle in modern-day Ghana. You know where the door of no return is? Well, this is how Europe got its wealth in later time, the last 400 or 500 years. But we did not exist only as property. We had history, and we dominated Europe long before this time. Let's go on. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, this is just a local description of that same company done in Europe, talking about it, found in the book to explain why it had that heraldry, why it had those symbols. There's always in a book. If you want to find information, find it in a book. Let's go on to the next. Okay, so these are the questions I'm going to try to answer throughout this discussion. Who were the Moors? What terms were used to describe these Muslims in Spain who conquered Spain for 700 years? Remember, 700 years, black people controlled Spain, okay? The same Spain that had the conquistadors and came over here and, so-called discovered America and all that. Black people controlled that country for 700 years. This country only existed for what? As America since 1789 in the Constitution for a little bit over 200 years. 700 years it was controlled in Europe. And it started in the conquest of Spain from 1710, and it encapsulated its conquest by 746, from 710 to 746. Let's go on. Try to answer those questions. Okay? But before I talk about that period of time, 710 and 711, we got to understand and establish why I say that black people were the original people on the continent there. Okay, what we would consider North Africa, what we considered Arab countries today. There is a history, and why that it transitioned from all these black people to the Arabs that exist right now in Egypt, in Morocco, and all these others. They were invaders. Okay, the first question, I'm sure that African descended from the people who created the Saharan rock paintings. This goes back there in the middle of Sahara, these caves that have these rock paintings of people going back at the minimum 12,000 years. This is scientifically known. Okay, black people who painted themselves on rocks, and there are still their descendants today who are in that area. The Haratans, Berbers, and the Chalchan Berbers. Let's get that straight. Then you had the European invaders going back to Kemet at the time of Egypt, around the time of Ramses III, who was the son of Ramses II, who people associate with Moses, and Seti I, who was this was the 19th dynastic period. All black folks, okay? But the first Europeans who came in was around that time, and that's around 1200 BC, okay? Then you had the Arab invasions, and that did not happen until the 600, 39, when they came in and conquered Egypt. Okay, they were asked to come in, but they decided to stay. That's a long distance away from 12,000 years ago. Okay, but yet we always see Arab folks, and I'm not knocking Arab, but this is chronologically, this is historical fact, that the Arabs did not come into existence, even though when Kevin Hart said that the Egyptians were black, you had an outcry from the Arabs who control Egypt saying that he's lying and that's our ancestry. No, they didn't come into that area until the AD. Then you had the other Europeans, descended from Slavic slaves. People don't understand that during medieval time, where the word slaves come from, Slavic people, that's Eastern Europeans. And during medieval times, there were these Europeans were enslaved, white Europeans, Eastern, what we would call Russia, Poles, all the people who are of Slavic heritage. That they were being enslaved so much that the word slave in this language system that we're speaking comes from that period of time around medieval Europe. That's what you get. Then you had another group again of African people who descend from, again, enslavement that established after 1492. 1492 was the cutoff date when they got rid of the Moors, okay, after 700 years, okay. Then again, there was another wave of Africans being brought back to Portugal and so on and so forth, okay. So that's the area of what I'm talking about the peopling of Northern Africa. It's a complex time, but the original, there's no complexity in the origin. There were Africans there thousands of years before any European or Arabs existed. And they were there in the millions. The Arabs were the minority during the first early part of when the Arabs invaded Spain. So let's go on to the next one, and we'll be continuing this. And this is something that you should find interesting. These are Saharan cave in Central Sahara. These are cave drawings. You could go there or Google it yourself. Don't believe me. But I want you to look at how they painted themselves. When I wanted to say that these were black people. That's what that area is. Look at how they painted themselves. These rock paintings, at a minimum, is 12,000 years old. This is what I was saying. I don't Google stuff. I just don't. This is painted on rocks by the original people, okay? This was before there was a Greece. There was before there was England. There was before there was even a Spain. There were black African people in that area. And look to the right of there's a picture again. These are the people who descend from them, okay? These are the Moors. Okay, these are the Haritan Moors, like I said, they were descended. This sister is a descendant of those folks. Thousands of years later, we still have these people here. Just like you have Native Americans in America, okay? The earliest Native people here in America, the earliest human remains is 21,000 years ago in America, okay? 21,000 years. They found some remnants, and most folks think they are represented by some more black folks who came across from America, from Europe, and that land bridge. Okay, this in this book. Before, when we ruled the world, that means there was nothing but black people on this planet. For the most of the time, we existed. Her ancestors drew those rock paintings. So let's go on to the next one. Now, this woman is also considered herself a Moor, but she is what would happen after all these invaders came in and mixed with those black people. You know, going back to the Persians came in and conquered Egypt and most of North America, the northern Sahara and those areas. The Phoenicians, the Greeks, Alexander, his folks, and Cleopatra. She was a descendant of one of Alexander's generals, Soter, and he took on the name of Ptolemy, which means warlike. I don't understand. Well, yeah, Greeks, they were pretty warlike. But and not knocking her, not disparaging her, but these are the image you always get when you see images of historical facts about Morocco and those areas. But that's recent. But they don't go far enough, and there's a reason. Go ahead. Let's go to the next one. You see, there's a lot of the word Moor is a European term. A lot of times when we are speaking and having these discussions and debates, we're using other outside people's terminology. The word Moor came from, people claim that it goes back to the Greeks, okay, who got it from the Phoenicians. You know, the Phoenicians use the word Moor because they talk about Moor. They think it comes from Mori, which is Mauritania, which is in Africa, okay. But they would use those terms to express all of northern Africa, all across from east to west, where Egypt is, all the way across to where they crossed, where you're going to find all these Arab states today. But that's what the Phoenicians, who went up and down the Mediterranean, and a lot of their words and language was taken over by all these other Europeans, like the Greeks. And they would take the term Moor or Mori and call Moorish, but it always means black or scorched. Look at that. Remember that rock painting? The skin of that individual doesn't look like it was scorched, burnt. That's how they described black people back then in the ancient times. We just Ethiopia means black skin or burnt skin. That's not describing somebody who is always portrayed in movies today. Okay, the burnt skin looked like me. Look like that sister, look like those rock paintings, or look like the Egyptians. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, what was going on in Spain? In Spain, when the Moors invaded, people never asked who these people they were invaded. You know, they were taken over by a Germanic tribe who took over, who was one of the groups that helped in 410 with the destruction of the Western Roman Empire. The Western Roman Empire collapsed in 410, and all these Germanic people started going across Europe, all the way, ended up into Britain after eventually. But Spain at the time when the Moors came in 710 and 711 was occupied by the Visigoths. These were Germans. And they had been in control for the previous 200 years. They are the ancestors of modern Spanish identity. You know, see Spain from the rule of the alien Roman Empire. Okay, the remnants of it. I got less than a minute, and again, I'll continue this on part 2 of this discussion. Let's go on, but I'm laying the foundation now. The Visigoth were Germanic people united under rule of a king living within the Roman Empire during the late antiquities of Rome. They joined the army. They were in these legions, and then when it collapsed, they started asserting their own identity because they were working for the Rome and got betrayed by the Rome. They were done like the native people was. They signed these treaties, and the Romans would just screw them up. And so they had no love for the Roman Empire, okay? And they ended up under the command of Alaric. This is what was going on at that time. So I'm going to stop it right here, and I'll start part 2 on the next show. So I hope I crammed in something that might have took months and months in a history class in just a few minutes. This is what I'm talking about. Knowledge is power. It's in books. Here are the books. So, until part 2, until next time, peace, Hotep, goodbye.